answering your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Steer. We'll now go to Dr. Lomborg, who is joining us from Paris. We very much appreciate his efforts to do so by video. I think it's 4:30 in the afternoon. I hope the weather is clear, and we look forward to your testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much to all your honored members. I'm actually going to show you some slides, so I hope that this will work at the same time. So we're pushing the technology to its fullest. And so here it is. So fundamentally, I would like to show you two main points, namely the impact and the cost of Paris. And as is perhaps not very surprising, I am going to take some issues with what Dr. Andrew Steer pointed out. So look, global warming is an important issue. It's man-made, it's a long-term problem, but I think what we need to understand is that we have little sense of the scale. Let me just show you this, and this is the UNFCCC, the ones that are organizing the the Paris meeting. If everybody does everything that is promised in Paris, we will cut the equivalent of 56 gigatons of CO2 till 2030. This is incontrovertible. Obviously, you can talk about, is it 40, is it 50, might it be 60? And just to show you what we're trying to achieve is about the 2-degree target will require us to cut more than 6,000 gigatons over the century. Mr. Steer and also Eddie Johnson mentioned that we're possibly on the road to 2.7 degrees. That would require about 3,000 gigatons of reduction. So remember, we're 1 or 2% of the way. That's important because it gives us a sense of proportion. Now, let me just show you briefly with a clean power plan. It will, if it's achieved, reduce temperatures trivially, as has been pointed out several times. It'll reduce emissions by 4 gigatons by 2030 and 42 gigatons through the century. So again, just to show you the scale, 4, 42, and what we're talking about achieving is 6,000 gigatons. That's also why if you run it in a standard climate model, you won't be able to tell the difference. It's in my description, but just to summarize it, if we just do the clean power plan until 2030, it'll reduce temperatures by 0.007 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. And even if it's continued in its full implementation until the end of the century, it will reduce temperatures by 0.023 degrees Fahrenheit. Likewise, if you look at the US climate promise, the promise to cut 26 to 28% below 2005 levels in 2025, it will reduce temperatures trivially. It will reduce 6 gigatons by 2025 and 100 gigatons throughout the century. Again, just look at the changes here. We're talking about a very, very small impact. And that's, of course, why if you run it in a climate model, again, you will get very, very small impacts. Again, if you actually keep your US Paris promise until the end of the century, you will reduce temperatures by 1/20th of a degree Fahrenheit. And let me just share with you what is the impact of all the INDCs, all the Paris promises. If you run this through a standard climate model, this is what you see. You can actually tell the difference, but not by very much. So again, if we just keep our promise till 2030, which of course is the only thing on sale here, we will reduce temperatures by 0.09 degrees Fahrenheit. If indeed they're kept all the way through the century, they will reduce temperatures by about 1/3 of a degree Fahrenheit. That is important because we're essentially talking about very small changes. At the same time, the costs are significant. Now, Andrew Steer would like us to believe that this is not very much. Actually, overall, we're going to see increases in growth, and we're actually going to make money from this. But certainly all standard models, these are all the models from the Stanford Energy Modeling Forum and all the other multi-model forums that have looked at the cost of climate policies through a variety of different models. They indicate on average the cost for the US is going to be about $154 billion if you do this well. And fundamentally that's because if you make energy more expensive, it will inevitably affect everything. It's not the end of the world economically, but it does have a cost. a cost of a couple of percent of GDP, and that's what turns out. Of course, we also know that most policies, I'm sorry for this committee to say that, but most policies are not perhaps most effectively implemented, and then we know they can be even more costly. So it's likely that we will see a cost of at least $1 trillion globally, and maybe even $2 trillion. And remember, this is the cost per year. And so in summary, the impacts of Paris are small, about 1/3 of a degree Fahrenheit at best. The cost of Paris is large. It's not a benefit. That's, of course, why we need everybody to cajole us into doing this. It's at least $1 trillion a year. Spending $1 trillion to cut virtually nothing of temperature, that's perhaps not the best way forward. And that's why we really need to recognize if we want to do better, we owe it to the world to spend our money better, both on focusing on R&D for green energy, as the chairwoman pointed out. That is what Bill Gates is now making us focus on. And of course, also realize that there are many other problems we need to fix as a world. So again, I say thank you very much to the committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lomborg, for that great testimony. I'll recognize myself for questions. Actually, you've anticipated my first question, which was, what impact would President Obama's pledge in Paris have on the Earth's climate? I think your word was it would have a trivial impact. You said all the pledges made in Paris would affect temperature by only 1/3 of a degree over the next 85 years, and the cost would be about $1 trillion a day. Is that all accurate as a summary?
Yes.
Okay.